Salvete omnes! In this lesson, you will be introduced to Latin verbs. Before continuing this video lesson, please read pages 13 through 17 and 418 through 425 in your textbook. This lesson will cover the following topics: word order versus inflection, morphology and parsing, forming third conjugation present active indicative verbs, translating present active indicative verbs, and vocabulary building as it relates to verbs. Take the following sentence. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dogs. How do you understand the relationships between each word? For example, how do you know that lazy modifies dogs and not fox? In English, the meaning of a sentence is almost entirely dependent upon word order. One such rule in English is that adjectives immediately precede the nouns they modify. Lazy comes before dogs, so it is the dogs that are lazy, not the fox. Moreover, if you were to rearrange the words of this sentence, its meaning would change entirely. It may even become unintelligible. Although word order is crucial for understanding English, it is not the only way to convey meaning. For example, how do you know that the action, jumped, took place in the past rather than the present or future? In English, the suffix ed indicates past tense. This process, by which a word is modified to change its meaning, is called inflection. Latin is a highly inflected language. While it does have some general tendencies when it comes to word order, meaning is primarily derived from morphology, or how each word is formed. The morphology of any given verb will communicate the following information. Person. Is the subject first person, second person, or third person? Number. Is the subject singular or plural? Tense. When did the action occur? Is it complete or ongoing? Voice. Is the subject doing the action, or is the action being done to the subject? Mood. What is the force or modality of the action? Breaking down the component attributes indicated by a verb's morphology, person, number, tense, voice, and mood, is called parsing. We will spend a lot of time parsing in this class, so it is important that you internalize this process as soon as possible. Now for the good stuff. How to form third conjugation present active indicative verbs. Latin verbs are classified into 5 groups called conjugations. Each conjugation, first, second, third, fourth, and mixed, is classified by its stem's thematic vowel. This will become more apparent as each conjugation is introduced, so don't worry too much about these classifications just yet. To demonstrate third conjugation present active indicative verb formation, we will use the verb lego, read, as our exemplum. Lego, I read. Legis, you read. Legate, he, she, they, it reads. Legimus, we read. Legatus, you read. Legunt, they read. Anytime we learn a new set of endings or morphologies, these sets are called paradigms. It is helpful to locate patterns, both within the paradigm itself and across other paradigms. So, what patterns do you notice? Each verb is composed of 2 parts, a stem and an ending. For the present active indicative of lego, the stem is leg, and the ending changes depending on the person and number of the subject. With the exception of the first person singular lego and the third person plural legunt, the first vowel of each ending is a short I. This might seem like a lot of information to internalize, and well, it is, but spending just a few minutes each day reciting or writing out paradigms will serve you well. Let's practice. Lego, legis, legate, legimus, legatus, legunt. Again. Lego, legis, legate, legimus, legatus, legunt. If you practice your paradigms regularly, you will eventually be able to produce them without much thought. This is called automaticity, and automaticity is fundamental to reading fluency. Now that we know how to form the third conjugation, present active indicative, let's move on to translation. Earlier in this video lesson, we learned what it means to parse a verb to analyze its component attributes. Do you remember what attributes to identify when parsing? Nota bene, there are 5. Person, number, tense, voice, and mood. Say them out loud with me. Person, number, tense, voice, mood. Again. Person, number, tense, voice, mood. As I mentioned before, it is crucial that you internalize the process of parsing as soon as possible. To frame our discussion of translation, we will move through each of these attributes in reverse order. Mood is the most abstract of these attributes. It signals a verb's force or modality. Is the speaker expressing a simple statement, a wish, a potential, or a command? Is the action something that actually occurred, or is it expressing the idea of the verb itself? For now, we only know one mood, the indicative. Indicative comes from the Latin verb indico, which means to declare or state. The indicative mood is the most common mood, and it expresses simple statements of fact. Voice indicates whether an action is being done by the subject or the action is being done to the subject. If a verb is active, that means the subject is doing the action. If a verb is passive, that means the action is being done to the subject. For now, we only know the active voice. There are 6 tenses of verbs in Latin. Each tense expresses when an action occurs, in the present, past, or future, and whether it is ongoing or complete. For now, we only know the present tense. The present tense is inherently ongoing or incomplete, and in English, there are many ways to communicate this. Lego, for example, may be translated as simply, I read, but also paraphrastically as, I am reading, or I do read. Person and number both refer to attributes of a verb subject, who or what is doing the action. Because Latin is highly inflected, it is not always necessary to express the subject of a verb. The ending o in Lego, for example, indicates that the subject of the verb is the first person singular I, without needing to express the subject pronoun. If you come across verbs without an express subject, you will need to supply a subject pronoun in English. If you come across forms such as legit and legunt, third person singular and plural, the subject is likelier to be expressed elsewhere in the sentence. A few miscellaneous items before we put all this into practice. Latin sentences tend to begin with their subjects and end with their verbs. Everything else, direct objects, indirect objects, adverbs, prepositional phrases, and some dependent clauses, usually occur in between. However, because Latin is highly inflected, an author may choose to move a word to the beginning or end of a sentence to emphasize it. To negate a verb, Latin uses the word non. Non most often immediately precedes the verb it is negating, though it may occur elsewhere in the sentence. Context is your best friend. To form a yes or no question, Latin adds ne to the end of the first word in the sentence. In this case, the first word is usually the verb, but it may be any word that the speaker wishes to emphasize. Now let's practice translating and parsing. What are all possible ways of translating this sentence? Felix currit. Felix runs. Felix is running. Felix does run. What are all possible ways of translating this sentence? Felix non currit. Felix is not running. Felix does not run. What are all possible ways of translating this sentence? Currit ne Felix? Does Felix run? Is Felix running? Now let's parse kurit. What is its person, number, tense, voice, and mood? Third person, singular, present, active, indicative. Remember, we currently only know one tense, one voice, and one mood, present, active, and indicative, so you can focus on identifying the person and number for now. The last item of business in this video lesson concerns vocabulary building. To keep things simple, Dickey delays the introduction of principal parts to Chapter 4 and asks you to relearn all the vocabulary you have spent time mastering in the first 4 chapters. To avoid this, I am going to briefly introduce this concept to you now. When you look up a word in a dictionary or in your textbook's glossary, each entry is organized in a uniform way that communicates certain information depending on the part of speech. A word's dictionary form is called its lemma. A verb's lemma contains what are called principal parts. Most Latin verbs have 4 principal parts. For example, the principal parts of curro are curro, currere, cucuri, and cursum. By now, you probably recognize the first principal part as the first person singular present active indicative. If you take off the O ending from the first principal part, you get the verb's present stem, which you need to identify in order to form the present tense. We will learn what the rest of the principal parts are and how to use them later. Memorizing each verb's principal parts in addition to the verb's definition will help you internalize patterns in morphology, ultimately improving your reading fluency. As such, I would rather you practice your vocabulary this way from the beginning. Pat yourself on the back for making it this far. You just took in a lot of information. For many people, part of learning Latin is like learning 2 languages at once. Obviously, you are learning Latin itself, but you are also learning how to talk about Latin grammar in English. We will continue to build upon these broad concepts, how to break verbs down into their component attributes and what those component attributes are, as we learn to read more complex sentences. For now, enjoy the simplicity of the present active indicative. With that said, Waleta!